It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you locally by Dr. Lyle M. Back. Everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelylback.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Andrew DiCecco is in the house today. I'm excited for this because, obviously, since the last time we talked to Andrew, the Eagles have made a trade. He is a big draft nut, studies the draft, obviously covers the Eagles, so this will be right in his wheelhouse. As the Eagles have moved to number 12, we bring Andrew DiCecco in to the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on the Sports Bash. What's going on, Andrew?
Mike, I'm doing well. How are you?
We know that the draft is something that is right up your alley, so we'll fire out with that. Howie Roseman makes a trade. They were at number 6. They move back to number 12. Do you like it in terms of making that move from what they could have gotten and what will now be available to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously that signifies, one, the compensation was too much for them to pass up, and two, they had a player on their board that they had ranked fairly high, right in that 12 to 15 range. I believe on your show, I mentioned that there was guys like a Quiddy Pay from Michigan. J.C. Horn's now going to be in the conversation with Caleb Farley going through that back procedure. He's going to drop down a little bit there. So I think J.C. Horn becomes a second corner. He'll be in play, possibly Jalen Waddle at 12. So, I mean, they're going to have some options, and obviously they had some of these players rated very high and know that they can get them there. So, I mean, yeah, there's going to be a drop-off somewhat after that in the draft. Unlike most drafts where the talent's kind of dispersed evenly throughout the first round, there's a considerable drop-off there. So that's pretty much the furthest that they could afford to go without sacrificing a big drop-off in talent.
I was going to say, so 12, how is the dip in talent from 6 to 12?
Well, I mean, then you're looking at your second edge rusher in Quiddy Pay. You know, Russo's the top guy. I mean, and he's not even cemented as the top guy. He still has a lot to prove. He has the freakish size and athleticism, but he's only really played one season, and he didn't show a lot of a pass rush repertoire, and he still has to grow into his body. So he's not necessarily a top guy, the top guy, bona fide. But I mean, you're looking at Surtain. It could be a preference. Surtain could be available at 12 if a team falls in love with J.C. Horn. But you're looking at your second corner more than likely. But you're still finding a starting player, a plug-and-play guy that can step right in and contribute right away as a rookie. So I mean, yeah, you're certainly not going to get your Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts, but you're still going to get a building block player that's going to be able to be a plug-and-play option.
All right, I want to bring this up to you because you just brought up you're not going to get Jamar Chase or you're not going to get Kyle Pitts. I saw a mock draft yesterday, CBS Sports, so a somewhat reputable site here. It's not like it was Jim's basement mock draft here, that had Kyle Pitts going to Philadelphia at number 12. Do you see a scenario where that happens?
I mean, it's kind of hard for me to envision that happening, considering his skill set, what he can bring to the table. It seemed like the Atlanta Falcons to me seems like a desirable destination for him. I think they're going to be intrigued by his ability to kind of add that component to their offense. There's so many teams that would just have to look past that. And he's the head and shoulders above every other tight end here, and he's not just a tight end as we've outlined on your show. So I mean, it's really difficult for me to envision him tumbling down to 12. That would be just a complete oversight and negligence by so many teams.
Let me show you how he got there, and you can kind of stop me when you disagree. Trevor Lawrence 1, Zach Wilson 2, Mac Jones 3.
Whoa. Mac Jones in the top 10. That's
well, there's a lot of people that think the 49ers traded up to target Mac Jones, right?
Yeah, I've heard that. I just don't know if I necessarily believe that. I don't think that Mac Jones is anywhere close to the ceiling than a Trey Lance, for example. I think Trey Lance is head and shoulders above Mac Jones, so it'd be hard for me to envision him. I see Mac Jones as more of a late first round guy. So to see him go at 3 I would be shocked for one.
All right, so there's one. 4, Atlanta, Penei Sewell. All right.
Mm-hmm.
5, Cincinnati, Rashawn Slater. Makes sense?
That's a little high. That's a little higher than I thought, but I thought he'd be another guy that would be in play at 12, but continue.
All right. Jalen Waddle, number 6 to Miami.
Okay.
Jamar Chase, number 7 to Detroit. Justin Fields, number 8 to Carolina. Micah Parsons, number 9 to Denver. Patrick Surtain, number 10 to Dallas. Elijah Vera Tucker, number 11, New York Football Giants. Kyle Pitts.
He's another guy that I don't necessarily know goes in that top 12 range. So there's two guys that I could foresee, going in, 12 to 15, but not necessarily in that high. That'd be a little rich for my blood.
Okay, Kyle Pitts, number 12 to Philadelphia. Now, the interesting part is, I might agree with you, but Devonta Smith, 13, Kwity Paye, 14, Trey Lance, 15, J.C. Horn, 16. So those are some guys that are going behind 12 that might move themselves ahead of 12.
Yeah, I mean, Devontae Smith is certainly somebody that I think him and Jalen Waddle are going to go right around the same spot. I have both players as top 10 guys on my draft board. I actually prefer Jalen Waddle over Devontae Smith, but I think that they would be top 10 guys. So I was surprised to see Devontae Smith kind of omitted from that group. But who knows? I mean, you see all different types of mock drafts.
Absolutely.
The draft goes a million different directions that nobody really anticipates. So it's going to be interesting, Mike, nonetheless, to see how this kind of shakes out. I mean, if Kyle Pitts falls to the Eagles at 12, I mean, that's a no-brainer, and that would be a tremendous steal for the Eagles. I just don't see that happening.
Oh, I mean, Andrew, if Kyle Pitts falls to 12, this might be the greatest trade in history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, by far.
All right, so let's look at a couple other things here. By the way, so they move back 6 spots. They get a first-round pick next year. They also add a fourth-round pick in this year's draft. Did you like the value that they got?
Yes, because there are going to be some players that I really like that the Eagles can address some serious areas of need in that mid-round, where you can still find some early contributors like a Jalen Twyman, the defensive tackle from Pitt, who I think that would add can immediately step in and be that third defensive tackle on the Eagles' rotation there, and he provides a pass rush. So I mean, you can find corners in that area that can step in and play. A Thomas Graham from Oregon. So I mean, they're going to get some value there, and they're not going to necessarily have to select a developmental guy that's going to ride the pine or not really contribute until year 2.
I know at 6th, if Sewell was there, you were a fan of that. Would you be interested in one of the other linemen, Vera Tucker, Slater, if they're there at 12? Are you as high on those two as you were Penei Sewell?
Penei Sewell is so dominant that it's kind of hard to compare anyone to him. But, Mike, what I would say is Slater would be enticing at 12, given his versatility, and the Eagles need to continue to add young players on the offensive line. I stand by my stance on that. He would be the one guy that I would give some strong consideration to if I'm the Eagles front office. But I think at 12 they should be looking at a Kwity Paye to bolster that defensive end room. That when you look at it under a microscope, Brandon Graham's getting long in the tooth. Derek Barnett has been an enigma this far into his career. And Josh Sweat's a little limited in the snaps that he's able to accumulate due to his past injury history. So when you look at that, and Vinny Curry is a free agent. So, I mean, when you look at those things, I think that needs to be addressed. And J.C. Horn at a corner would be another guy that I would consider to be a strong play at 12.
Yeah, I like him at 12 too. If Waddle or Smith are at 12, is this a home run trade too? I mean, if one of those two guys is there at 12 and you land that, is that something that you'd say this is a home run?
Yeah, and that is something that I could foresee happening. I could see Jalen Waddle tumbling down to 12, and that would be a home run. Devontae Smith as well, but like I was saying, I'm particularly high on Waddle when I'm looking at both Alabama wide receivers.
Last year in the draft, you had Ruggs, you had Jerry Jeudy. By the way, Ruggs was the first one taken at number 12. I would imagine that the wide receivers go before that, but Ruggs, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk. You had that group of guys go in the first round. Is that group deeper, better, or this year's first round guys?
I like last year's group better. I think that was just a historic class that's going to be very hard to top. That said, this is going to give it a run for their money, this class right here. Just even in that top group alone, you're going to get a lot of guys that are going to be stepping in and be valuable contributors as rookies. So I do think that it's deep here, but I think that 13 or 14 wide receivers went in the first two rounds last year, which is unprecedented, and I think that that's going to be certainly hard to top. So I give the edge to the 2020 draft.
Right. Now, last year, like, Ruggs was the first one taken. He did not have a great year. Jeudy had a solid year. He wasn't great. CeeDee Lamb, solid year. Reagor obviously had all sorts of injuries. Jefferson was a beast. Ayuk was probably the second. Actually, you could make a case that T. Higgins was the second best guy from last year's class. So I guess the point of this is moving from 6 to 12, just because you don't take the first wide receiver doesn't mean you might not get the better one.
Oh, absolutely. And you outlined that nicely, Mike. I mean, you look at T. Higgins, and T. Higgins was an afterthought at this time last year, and he stepped in right away.
And don't forget Chase Claypool.
Chase Claypool. Well, the Eagles fans know all about Chase Claypool. I mean, but T. Higgins was someone that was overlooked throughout the whole draft process. Didn't really flash any sort of flashy intangibles, but he was just a solid overall football player, and he kind of gave the Bengals what a newer version of AJ Green, what they had there. So I mean, these type of players, Rashad Bateman's going to be somebody that's going to rise and probably be a come off the board very early on day two. So there's a ton of receivers here that get Elijah Moore. It's all a matter of what your flavor is and what your preference and what your need really is. But there's going to have all shapes and sizes of talent there. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about this class.
All right. Initial thought when they got 12 is this is the guy that, if you had a guy at 6 that, hey, I really hope they get this guy or 6 or like this fit. Now at 12, in your mind of who will be there at 12 is the best player available for this team?
The best player available, I would say, would be Jalen Waddle, or I would say J.C. Horn. J.C. Horn, to me, and I believe I put this out on Twitter even 3 months ago, I said when it's all said and done, when the dust settles, it wouldn't surprise me if J.C. Horn becomes the top corner in this class. And that very feasibly could happen if another team prefers his skill set and ceiling and upside over the more polished and refined, but less, kind of less flashy, so to speak, the Patrick Surtain. And I mean, I think right there, that would be great value. You're getting a day one starter on the boundary. And I really like what he brings to the table. He has that alpha mentality that a lot of the premier corners like the Jalen Ramseys really have. And I think that would be a great home run pick at 12.
Anthony Harris, they signed last week. So Gannon, the new defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, did that signing, kind of give you a glimpse of what kind of defense that he may employ this year?
No, not really. I mean, he provided another veteran back end player that can kind of help implement his system a little easier to some of the younger players, the younger contingent. I think he's going to be a solid complement to Rodney McLeod, a good veteran. He is a playmaker. He can make plays on the football. He didn't really do that last year, but like we talked about, I believe it was last week, Minnesota's pass rush, and there's a lot of other variables that contributed to his down year, but he's an all-around safety. So I think the great thing about him is that he'll be able to mold his defense around him or Rodney because they have such a versatile skill set. So, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what he does with his defense because, I mean, he kind of – and that's another reason why I think they're going to take a defensive back pretty high, knowing his defensive back pedigree. And it'll be interesting to see. I think that the cool thing about this year is that all the defensive backs have some size to them, aside all the premier ones except for Asante Samuel Jr., and he's had some success with these bigger guys like the Xavier Rhodes and the Rocky Sims. So he's going to have his pick.
Talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football 4, a couple more for him. If you look again, and we're staying on the defensive side, the linebackers he's had to work with in the past. Now, he was a secondary guy, but Darius Leonard, Anthony Barr, I mean, he's worked with some pretty interesting linebackers there. In round 2, the Eagles have a high pick in the second round. I know I talked to Moshe about Micah Parsons, and he just laughs. There's no way they're taking a linebacker with that 12th pick or even the 6th pick, and I guess Micah Parsons was the guy that we both were kind of insinuating. So he says no shot in round 1. But if that that second round pick, is there a guy at linebacker in the second round that makes sense at 37?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Bolton from Missouri, and I would also say Browning from Ohio State. Browning, to me, he's got the prototypical size, he's got the athleticism, he has the coverage acumen that really will translate to the current landscape of the NFL, where you really have to have you have to be a cover linebacker first, the run defender second, and to keep up with today's all these movable pieces and spread offenses and things like that. I think for matchup purposes, he's a guy that I actually listed in a Q&A that I did for InsideTheBirds.com, him being one of the players that I thought would be ready to step in day one and take on a contributing role. Elijah Molden, the defensive back from Washington, being another one. But, yeah, I think Browning, for what the Eagles need, he's a more polished version, a far more polished version of what they thought they were getting in Davion Taylor last year, and he has more size.
That's I like the fact Baron Browning from Ohio State. He would be a guy that would interest me there as well. Nick Bolton, I think I don't know. I think I would like Browning a little bit better for what you mentioned with his athleticism and the way he covers. Do you think Sean Bradley or Davion Taylor factor in at all in the linebacking role this year?
I do not, and I just think that when they took Sean Bradley, Mike, my initial thought was he's going to be a core special teamer. I saw a sharp, heady football player, physical, knows his assignments, very diligent in that area. But that said, he has his limitations, and I thought that his ceiling was always going to be a sub-package player. I never really saw him as a starting linebacker in the NFL. Davion Taylor, to me, was always a project. I had a 4th-round grade on him. I thought that a team would be enamored with his athleticism, and they were. But I thought he had a long way to go as a pro. He had to refine a lot of areas in his game. A lot of the plays that he made were instinctual rather than it was more so just him running around like his hair was on fire, rather than seeing the play develop, knowing his keys and everything that he was responsible for. And I still think that he's another year away. He's this full off season, but I think he's still a year away from being a contributor for the Eagles team.
For a guy like you, Andrew, you know the draft well. You know the guys in the deep rounds well. But when I say the Eagles have 4 of the top 84 picks, how valuable is that?
Oh, I mean, it's exactly what they need. I think they should stay with all of their draft picks and start expediting the youth movement and get the young players in here and go through the growing pains with them, Mike, because they're not in position to really win anything now. They really need to start to build this thing from the ground up. And by the time that they're able to see, it's probably going to be a 3-year rebuild. By the time that they do that, all these young players are going to be ready they should be hitting their peak and being able to propel the Eagles to being one of the bona fide teams in the NFL. And a serious playoff contender. So I think that you're going to have to go through the growing pains early on. But, I mean, having those top 84, having so many of those picks in the top 84 is incredibly valuable because there's a lot of a lot of high-end talent that the Eagles really need to capitalize on and nail all their picks, because they have a lot of areas, obviously, of need, but there's going to be plenty of opportunities for them to address it.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, of course, InsideTheBirds.com, and he, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Football at 4, a lot of draft conversation between now and the April 29 draft. The Eagles have now 11 picks, most in the NFL, and as Mo said yesterday, don't discount the possibility of them moving back up. They have 12. Could they go with all that ammunition, get themselves into a spot like, hey, if there's a player they really want at number 8, 9, can they jump over Dallas? I think it's really interesting that Dallas, New York, and Philly are all boom, boom, boom in that first round there. So that should be fun on draft night. We'll continue to have it covered with Andrew here during Football at 4. He's back on Thursday. Moshe is back tomorrow as Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Andrew.
You bet.
All right, Football at 4 is brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. Everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelylback.com.